Hello, everyone. I'm David Younger,
Hi, I'm Elvin
and we created chronic illness therapy to provide support and resources for people living with chronic health conditions.
Hi. So today, me and David would like to talk about how we can be socially involved, what kind of issues we face when we are dealing with chronic illness, and there's a social gathering, and how we would like to avoid it, but how it can benefit us. What are the issues? What are some tools that we can use in dealing with those moments or events, or some people that we don't like in those places. So David was telling me about how he ended up having a very busy weekend with lots of social gatherings, and that's when we thought this could be a wonderful opportunity to introduce to our channel, to our viewers, how we can deal with these situations.
Yeah, and especially because, the three different social events I had were so different. So Friday was at a concert and I took my wheelchair, and it was navigating these crowds, and there was one woman who just took it upon herself to walk in front of me and part the sea for me, and was just a total sweetheart. And I was with other people who could have been doing that too, but it was more just being anxious about running over people's hands or feet. And so that took energy. But in terms of socializing, very little socializing, because it's, you're there in a mass sea of people. But my initial reaction is to not to want to go. And part of it is, kind of separating out what's the chronic illness piece and what's the introvert piece, and they work together.
True.
Then
And sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but even if you're an extrovert, I'm sure there's a lot to be said there. I think for an extrovert, there are different issues at play, like what will others think about me and how will I feel there? I won't be like my usual self, and all sorts of other things,
Yes. Yeah. And part of it in terms of using the chair, and I've got this distinct perspective because I don't use the wheelchair on a daily basis. I use it when we have outings, or times like, when there's going to be a lot of walking, or so being seen in a very different way, standing out in a way that I don't particularly want to stand out, but
How does it make you feel? Say more about that.
well, that definitely is the shame comes up then. And I think the transition from being a young man, I think that there's definitely something about my masculinity, and when you're in a wheelchair, even if you're not interacting with women in any sort of flirtatious or sexualized way. I don't know if that's clear, but I just miss being able to, have that eye contact, and
You miss to be able to be seen as a man.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's totally fair, and I can really hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that you're into anything like that. I totally hear you want to be seen as a man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus as, oh, you're a man and a young man in a wheelchair. So it's more like being looked at like with, in a curious way, or a compassionate way. But there's just a loss there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Totally.
is really, it's really palpable when I'm, in events like this.
I can totally hear that, and I would feel the same. And I can imagine a cancer patient with no hair or bandana or looking pale will feel the same, whether he or she, whether it's a he or she.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then so Saturday was a dinner party, and I also went with my chair because it was in the backyard, and there were times of going back and forth between going up these stairs onto the deck and
Mm.
back into the garden. So I wasn't doing that. And um, there's definitely, when you're with a group of people who are not dealing with uh, a disability or a chronic illness, and they're just operating on a different frequency.
Hmm.
And I'm sure, this is where the introverted part and the chronic illness part kind of merge. But, my lack of interest in small talk and just chatting, and just how draining I feel it is,
Hmm.
um, really uh, gets to me. And um,
I totally agree with you, and also I think our age comes in as well. I mean, we're young, but not that young anymore. I personally in my mid 40s. You are in your beginning 40s, so I think, and we both have families. So I think I am also losing more and more interest in large social gatherings, and I enjoy more small get-togethers where I can have good quality conversations with the people. I mean, that's where I am now. And yet somehow we sometimes have to attend those parties and gatherings because somebody we love has a birthday or something. So having a chronic illness, I mean, what do you think helped you in both events? And what do you think could have been different, or you would have done differently, or you would have asked someone to do differently, you think, in both of those?
well, so, all right, one important question. That's a really good question, first of all. Um, One important thing is, when I ask myself, like before the concert, I wanted to go see Paul McCartney. I love the Beatles. It's a once in a lifetime thing. I wanted to go with my son. I've been singing Beatles songs to him ever since he was born. And we were able to have, these moments where we were holding hands and singing Blackbird together, with Paul
Oh,
McCartney.
wonderful.
So it
Mm.
was so worth going. But
Mhm.
my instinct is to avoid it and to say I don't want to go, and for the fear to kick in. So one of the things that I have to do is try and be honest with myself and sit there and thinking, all right, is this self-care? Am I not going if I choose not to go because I'm taking care of myself, or am I doing it because of the shame or the fear or the anxiety?
Love
So
it.
that's
Mm.
one piece that I think is really important that I'm dealing with all the time.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that could have been better, this was my first time there. If, there are sections, you have to pay more money, to like go and be
Oh.
in like a VIP section where there's, less people.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't do that. The tickets were expensive. They were $100 to just go in and be on, in the park. Um, but I was with people who I know and trust, and who were helpful with,
Uh-huh.
so that was a good thing. Um, so I'm not sure I would have done anything differently for that.
I think what you said is a great exercise, like to think, is this really about my shame? Am I defending myself against some internal process, or am I defending myself against something really out there and is real? Is it external? So I think making that differentiation is greatly helpful.
Yes,
So
yes, the internal versus the external.
yeah,
And
I think, as you said, the experience was so worth it afterwards, when you reflect with the hindsight. So I'm really glad to hear that. And I think it's a great example.
yeah, and when I juxtapose, or not, well, not juxtaposed, but well, Saturday was the dinner party. And it was important to go because it was a really good friend's 50th birthday.
Mhm.
And I actually liked a lot of the people that were there. But I felt the energy just draining from
Mhm.
my body. Um, and so I was in this struggle for a lot of the night of, I don't want to be here. Stay present, just make the best of it. And, just wanting to like literally just go without saying goodbye. Um,
So let me ask you this. Would you have said the same thing even if you were not um, in the wheelchair, or if you did not have any disability in walking?
that's a good question. And it's so hard to know. I mean,
Mm,
I can know it in some ways because I can think back when my disability affected me a lot less,
mhm,
and I was still an introvert.
mhm.
So yes, it probably a lot of it had to do with just personality stuff, and less to do. I mean, the one thing I can say though is when I'm not in my environment, and this is something that Debbie noticed too. She's like,
Mm,
I notice how much easier it is for you when we have events here in our home, when you
mm,
get comfortable physically, than
mm,
when we're going other places and you can't get around, or there's not a comfortable place to sit. And
mm.
it just adds to it just makes it that much more difficult.
So are you saying that when you have more control of your environment, you can tolerate more these kind
Yes.
of social interactions? So
Yes.
a small takeaway for people who are watching us then is to maybe call beforehand where they're going and ask if there will be enough places to sit for them, maybe a sturdy chair with a pillow, or take something with them. Would that be helpful?
Absolutely. And it's something usually Debbie does. But we always sort of check ahead to see
Mm.
what the accessibility is
Mm-hmm.
like. And you can't do a whole lot in terms of the seating and the chairs. And that's just, but yes, I mean, definitely planning ahead like that, it does help.
Okay.
Um,
In terms of the social interaction,
yeah.
do you feel you would have done something differently? Anything? Um, Having a chronic illness or not having a chronic illness, just compare yourself. If you do not experience the symptoms so strongly, would you interact with people differently? What would you have preferred to happen now or that night?
Um, it's hard to say. I Because I was having such a visceral reaction, I literally felt like my body was shutting down. And I think that part of it is that the weekend before I was in New York,
Yeah,
I was traveling, I was exhausted.
yeah,
The night before we were at this concert until late.
yeah.
So I normally rely on weekends to recharge and relax, and I didn't have it the weekend before. I didn't have it the night before. So part of it was just being the timing of it was just
Great. So let's not group all of the social activities together.
yes,
That pace them, if
yes,
possible.
yes. Yeah, this is such a rarity to have Friday something, Saturday something, and Sunday something.
Mm.
And Sunday was so different because it was an event at Emma's school, and called Garden Day, where all like parents go with the kids and help to tend the garden.
Mm-hmm.
That was something physically I couldn't really do, but Emma was saying, I want you to come, I want you to come. And I really wanted to go. And so we did call ahead and plan, and I took my chair, and it was so different because actually I just felt people were so natural. There's something about being related to in a way where, not as the guy in the wheelchair or the guy with the disability, but just one of the parents. And I was, talking with another parent who I met there, and we were talking for a lot of the time. And one of the staff came up to me and said, hey, if you want to do something in the herb garden, we can probably, make that happen. And it just felt like I was part of it and not that people were tiptoeing around me,
Mm. I
and not
can really
knowing
hear
how
that.
to interact with me. And it felt really good.
In my limited experience, I feel that um, when people are in their parenting roles, like around their children, they tend to be nicer and more wholesome. as opposed to at a dinner party when they're not in their parenting roles and trying to, there's a little competition going, there's a little flirtation going, and person with the chronic illness feels less than because they're not there in that moment, they're not in that mood. Well, you could be as well. I mean, there's nothing that stops you, but you might feel like you can't compete for various reasons with that guy who's maybe being very physical and whatever, or woman. And so I think, and also I always think that people who tend to deal with soil are usually more connected to their core selves than someone who would just come to a party, for example. I think there's that difference as well. So maybe the kind of activity, and music as well, like when you went to the concert, it was nicer, So I think it's about also the kind of activity you choose and where you might feel better. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think those are really good points. The difference between being with your kids and being in an environment at a dinner party environment, and also what it is that you're doing as a shared activity. Everyone singing "Hey Jude" together, old and young and able,
Gives me
disabled.
goosebumps right now, even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so special. And he's 76, I think, and
he's
his voice
extraordinary. Yeah.
well, his voice is not what it was, but who cares? It's still Paul McCartney and the Beatles and singing, Let It Be and Blackbird and Hey Jude. And yeah, it was super special.
Really glad to hear it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm sure it will help a lot of people to hear that and relate to that.
Yeah, I hope so. And if it is helpful, please remember to like and share with others, and subscribe to our channel, and to check out chronicillnesstherapy.com.